My name is Catherine Hall. I am 58 years old, a widow, and for most of my life I have chosen to live quietly. I once worked in finance, not in skyscrapers or high-stakes boardrooms, but in modest firms where numbers mattered more than appearances. I raised my daughter alone after my husband Thomas died, and I learned how to stretch silence into a shield. People see me as plain, even burdensome, because I never flaunt wealth or status. What they never see is that silence, when chosen carefully, can be the sharpest weapon. That night, at my daughter's engagement dinner, that silence was tested in front of everyone. The restaurant glittered with crystal chandeliers, wine glasses shimmered under the lights, and laughter swirled like smoke across the tables. Ethan, my daughter Clara's fiancé, stood at the center of it all. He looked every bit the successful young lawyer, handsome, confident, trained to win attention. Clara sat beside him, radiant in her satin dress, her eyes full of nervous pride. I sat further down the table, in my navy dress, wearing the same sapphire necklace Thomas once gave me. It was the only luxury I carried into that room. Ethan lifted his champagne glass and smiled, his voice carrying over the music. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate not only our love but the joining of families. And here," he pointed toward me with a flourish, "here is the family burden nobody wants." The words sliced through the air like glass shattering on marble. Guests roared with laughter, some doubling over, others clapping their hands. The cruelty spread in waves until it filled the entire room. Clara froze. Her face turned crimson as she lowered her eyes, too ashamed to look at me. I did not rise. I did not speak. I only tightened my fingers around the sapphire at my throat. My silence became my answer, but inside, my chest burned. To be mocked as a burden at my only daughter's engagement dinner by the man she loved was a humiliation I would never forget. The laughter had not yet died when the door opened. A tall man in a gray tailored suit strode in, his footsteps deliberate, his expression impatient from arriving late. The noise slowly dissolved as heads turned to watch him. It was Richard Coleman, the founder and president of Coleman Enterprises, one of the most respected corporations in the city. He was also, though most of the guests did not yet realize, Ethan's boss. The man whose name could decide Ethan's career with a single word. Richard walked straight toward our table. When his eyes landed on me, he stopped. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he bowed his head deeply. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady with respect, "your investment saved us. Without you, Coleman Enterprises would have collapsed, and hundreds of families, including mine, would have lost everything. I owe you more than I can ever repay." The dining hall froze. Forks paused mid-air. Wine glasses trembled in stunned hands. The silence was heavier than stone. Ethan's smile cracked. His grip on the glass whitened until it threatened to break. Clara's lips parted in disbelief, her eyes locked on me as if she was seeing her mother for the first time. I met Richard's gaze and answered softly, "I only did what was right." But in that single moment, the room turned upside down. The so-called burden became the pillar, the joke became the power, and Ethan, the man who mocked me to elevate himself, now stood revealed as the subordinate of the very woman he tried to humiliate. The sapphire at my neck pulsed with weight, as though Thomas himself was beside me, reminding me that dignity never needs to shout. It only needs the right moment to speak. The laughter had ended, and with it a new story began. And if you are still here listening, ask yourself, have you ever been underestimated, mocked, or dismissed as worthless, only to discover that your quiet strength was greater than their arrogance? Stay with me, because this story is about that very truth. And if you have lived something like this, share it in the comments below, so your voice can echo too. I am Catherine Hall, And though people think they met me for the first time at that dinner, my story began long before the laughter and the humiliation. To understand who I am, you need to know where I came from and why I chose the life I live now. I am a widow, and I have been one for more than a decade. My husband, Thomas, was the love of my life. He was a quiet man, a mechanical engineer who never cared about climbing social ladders or impressing people with titles. He cared about building things that lasted, machines that worked, and a home that felt safe. We met when I was 24, and for 30 years he was my anchor. Thomas was steady in a world that often felt too loud. He believed in numbers, in logic, and in responsibility. We never had much when we started, but what we did have was enough. He used to come home late, his hands still stained with the oil and metal shavings from the factory floor. He would drop his lunchbox on the table and kiss me on the cheek as if I was his entire world. We lived in a small house then, not far from the river. The wallpaper was peeling, the pipes rattled in winter, but Thomas made me feel like it was a palace. When Clara was born, everything shifted. I left my job at the bank and focused on raising her while Thomas worked extra shifts. He would walk into her room late at night, still wearing his work boots, and whisper promises into her crib, promises that she would never know hunger, never feel the emptiness he had felt as a child. His father had been absent, his mother exhausted. He swore he would be different, and for years he was. Then came the heart attack. He was 52. One moment he was bent over blueprints at his drafting table. The next, he was gone. The shock of it nearly broke me. Clara was only 15 and she lost her father at the exact age she needed him most. I remember the way she cried into my lap, begging for answers I could not give. I remember standing at his funeral, clutching the sapphire necklace he had given me on our 20th anniversary, the one gift he had saved months for. He had said to me then, "This stone will outlast me. When you wear it, remember that love is stronger than time." Since that day, I have never taken it off for an important moment. After his death, the company insurance paid out a modest sum. It was not a fortune, but it was more than we had ever held in our hands at once. Most widows in my position would have paid off the house, secured a quiet retirement, and left it at that. But Thomas's voice lingered in my ear. He had always told me I was sharper with numbers than I gave myself credit for. I decided to honor him by being careful, by treating that money not as an ending, but as a beginning. So I invested. At first, it was small. Conservative stocks, bonds, safe ground. But as years passed, I learned. I read late into the night, studied market trends, followed companies rising from nothing. I grew that money quietly, steadily, piece by piece. And yet, I never changed my life on the surface. I drove the same reliable sedan. I shopped at modest stores. I lived in the same apartment with creaking floors and mismatched curtains. People looked at me and saw a widow surviving off a pension. They pitied me. Sometimes even patronized me. What they never guessed was that behind that quiet exterior, I was building something far stronger, and I kept it from Clara. Not because I did not trust her, but because I wanted her to grow her own wings. I did not want her to depend on a safety net, or worse, attract people who only saw her as an entry point to wealth. Thomas and I had worked too hard for our values to be corrupted by appearances. So I told her we had enough, but not abundance. I told her we were comfortable, but not rich. She believed me, and perhaps in believing, she grew stronger. The sapphire necklace became my reminder of both truths. The truth of love I lost, and the truth of strength I had to maintain. Whenever I touched it, I remembered Thomas's hands placing it around my neck. I remembered that I was not just a widow clinging to memories. I was a woman carrying his legacy forward. People mistook my quiet for weakness. They mistook my plain clothes for poverty. They mistook my silence for emptiness. But silence can be a fortress. It can protect what is precious until the day comes when it must be revealed. At my daughter's engagement dinner, when Ethan mocked me in front of everyone, I held that sapphire and chose not to speak. It was not cowardice. It was the discipline I had practiced for years. Because when you hold the truth that others cannot even imagine, you learn to let silence speak louder than words. That is who I am. I am Catherine Hall, widow, mother, the so-called burden nobody wants. Yet beneath the surface, I am the keeper of choices that saved companies, of investments that shaped futures, and of secrets I held back only because I wanted my daughter to stand on her own 2 feet. My silence is not weakness. My silence is strategy. And one day, they would all see it. After the engagement dinner ended, the silence in the car ride home was louder than the laughter that had humiliated me. Clara sat in the passenger seat, her hands twisting the strap of her clutch, her face pale under the glow of the streetlights. I kept my eyes on the road, the hum of the engine steady, almost comforting. I thought perhaps she would speak first, that she would defend me, or at least acknowledge the cruelty of Ethan's words. Instead, when we pulled into the driveway, she turned to me sharply. "Mom," she said, her voice tight, "you cannot take what Ethan said so seriously. He was just joking. Please don't make me feel embarrassed by turning this into a bigger issue." I stared at her, unable to form words at first. Just joking. That was what she chose to call it. A public insult, a wound delivered in front of everyone, and she dismissed it as humor. I felt my throat close, but I forced myself to swallow the pain. The sapphire at my neck pressed into my skin as if reminding me to stay silent, to endure. Clara's eyes flickered with unease when she saw my expression. She looked away, fumbling with her purse. "Mom, you know how people are at these events. They drink, they tease, they exaggerate. Ethan was only trying to lighten the mood. Please don't make me look like I can't handle my own fiancé." Her words stung more than Ethan's insult. It was one thing for him to mock me. It was another for my daughter to shield him. My heart twisted. Where had I gone wrong? I raised her to value kindness, to respect dignity. I taught her that love was proven by protection, not by betrayal. Yet here she was, standing on the side of a man who humiliated me. I wanted to shout, to ask her how she could not see the arrogance in his smirk, how she could not hear the cruelty hidden beneath his so-called joke. But I did not. Instead, I simply nodded and said quietly, "If that is how you see it, Clara." She exhaled in relief, mistaking my restraint for agreement. "Thank you, Mom. I just need you to trust me. Ethan will give me the kind of life you never had. He is ambitious, respected, and secure. You will see that he can take care of me." There it was, the truth hidden in her voice. Ethan was not only her choice for love, he was her choice for safety. She saw in him the promise of stability, the promise of a life untouched by financial worry. She did not know that I had already built that safety for her, quietly, silently, through years of careful investment. She thought I had nothing, and so she clung to him as her escape from the burden she imagined me to be. In that moment, I felt a deep ache, heavier than any loneliness I had carried since Thomas's death. Had I been wrong to hide the truth from her? Had I raised her to be blind to character, to choose security over integrity? I wondered if my silence, the shield that had protected us for so long, had become a wall between us instead. As she walked ahead into the house, I stayed behind for a moment in the car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The leather creaked beneath my hands. I thought of Thomas, of the promises he whispered into Clara's crib, of the values he wanted her to grow up with. Would he have blamed me for letting her slip so easily into the arms of a man who disrespected her mother? Inside, Clara busied herself in the kitchen, pouring water, avoiding my gaze. I watched her and saw not the little girl who once clutched my skirt at school gates, but a woman determined to convince herself she was safe. She wore the ring Ethan gave her, flashing it proudly, as if the diamond was proof of love rather than a chain of expectation. I said nothing more that night. Silence once again became my refuge, but my heart whispered questions I could not silence. Had I failed her? Was I protecting her, or had I abandoned her to illusions of security? I lay awake later staring at the ceiling, the sapphire necklace cool against my collarbone. Its weight reminded me of Thomas, of love built on sacrifice, not on appearances. My daughter did not understand that yet. She believed Ethan's ambition would shelter her, that his status would guarantee her happiness. But I knew better. I had seen men like him before, hungry, polished, and cruel beneath the charm. Foreshadowing hung in my mind like a storm cloud. Clara's blindness to his arrogance was not just youthful naivete, it was a warning. She was willing to excuse his cruelty for the promise of protection. That path would not lead to safety. It would lead to heartbreak and perhaps to something far worse. As I closed my eyes, one thought pierced through the silence. If I had been wrong to keep my wealth hidden, if my secrecy had made my daughter mistake arrogance for strength, then the reckoning was coming. And when it came, Ethan's so-called jokes would be the least of our worries. The morning after that car ride, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table. The apartment felt smaller than it had in years. My phone buzzed before the kettle finished. James Harrison's name lit the screen. I answered. "Catherine, we have a problem," he said. "Ethan has retained Harrington Law. They are already probing your finances." Their memo outlines 3 angles: concealed assets, tax evasion, and alleged stock manipulation related to Coleman Enterprises. The kettle whistled. The night before, I had been mocked as a burden. Now, I was a target. I moved the kettle off the burner and poured slowly, watching steam rise like a thin veil between me and the life I thought I still controlled. "What do they have?" I asked. "And what do they think they have?" "Fragments," James replied. "Public filings, old addresses, a list of LLCs that look anonymous to amateurs. Harrington is trying to tie your entities to trades in Coleman. They are hinting at Rule 10 B5 violations, insider trading, and failures to file beneficial ownership reports." I steadied my breathing. "We have filed every form required." "We have," he said. 13G when you crossed 5%. Amendments when needed, disclosures when private placements occurred. But Catherine, accusations do not need to be true to do damage. They only need oxygen. The tea went bitter on my tongue. I stared at a tiny crack in the tabletop. Ethan wanted humiliation amplified by the state. Shame is private. Scandal is televised. James continued. Harrington's partner, Leonard Cho, is aggressive. He leaks. Headlines could precede subpoenas. I walked to the window and pressed my palm against the cool glass. Outside, delivery trucks groaned up the street. "What is our posture?" I asked. "Defensive or preemptive?" "Preemptive," he said. "I want a clean timeline of your positions, bank confirmations, 1099's K1S, Schedule D entries, every Form 4 where you advised officers to wait, not trade. We will prepare a letter to Harrington, firm, factual, and immediate. And Catherine, start a contemporaneous journal today. Dates, calls, impressions. If this escalates, your memory becomes evidence." My hand went to the sapphire at my throat. The facets caught the winter light. Thomas had given it to me on a night when we had nothing but faith. I heard his voice again, calm, patient, uncompromising. "Never let anyone else control your story." "I hear you," I said. "I will control mine." After the call, I opened the metal box in the hall closet. Folders rested there like quiet soldiers. Brokerage statements, partnership agreements, correspondence from years of careful work. I laid them out on the table, then opened my laptop and created a chronology. The cursor blinked like a metronome for resolve. I typed, Year 1, decision to hold. Year 2, partial sale, taxes prepaid. Year 3, charitable transfer to the scholarship fund we never announced. A message arrived from an unknown number. "We should talk. Dinner tomorrow. R. Coleman." I stared at the initials and felt a complicated mixture of gratitude and dread. Richard had bowed at the dinner. He had publicly acknowledged what I had kept private. His message reminded me that my silence had limits. I did not reply. By noon, James sent a secure link. I uploaded scans, signed declarations, and a short statement of investment philosophy. Plain words, no spin. Quiet profit, long horizons, no inside edges. Then I called Clara. She did not answer. I left a message. Safety is not a ring or a title. Safety is the character of the person who stands beside you. I wanted her to hear that even if she refused to understand it today. I wanted her to be safe. I wanted truth to outrun charm. I needed control before rumors wrote me. The afternoon darkened early. I walked to the corner copy shop, made certified duplicates, and mailed packages to James's office and my accountant. On the way back, snow began to fall, soft, deliberate, erasing footprints faster than they were made. I thought of how easily records can be misunderstood when taken out of sequence, how easily kindness can be misnamed weakness, how easily a woman can be rewritten by men who want her contained. At dusk, James called again. "One more thing," he said. "Harrington scheduled an informal meeting. They want you present next week with counsel. It is voluntary. They are hoping to spook you into contradictions." "I prefer the written record," I said. "I know," he replied, "but this is theater. If you decline, they will say you are hiding. If you attend, they will try to bait you. We can bring a court reporter and treat it like testimony. Every question, every pause on the record." I looked at the sapphire. It seemed darker now, a small night sky resting against my skin. "Book it," I said. "And James, I want the first 5 minutes. I will state my name and my purpose. I will set terms." "You are sure?" "I am finished watching other people narrate my life." When the call ended, I wrote Thomas's sentence on an index card and slid it under the glass on my desk. "Never let anyone else control your story." I said it aloud once, then again, slower, letting the rhythm fix my breath. Somewhere between humiliation and strategy, a boundary formed. Ethan could mock me. Harrington could circle. But the story would be mine. That night, I slept with the document stacked neatly beside the bed and the phone on silent. Before I turned out the light, I touched the sapphire and made a quiet promise. To tell the truth, to protect my daughter, and to meet whatever came next without fear. We did not begin with wealth. Thomas and I started with nothing but hope, a modest paycheck, and the discipline to stretch every dollar. In the early years of our marriage, we saved quietly. While others bought new cars or bigger homes, we drove the same sedan and ate dinner at our kitchen table with hand-me-down chairs. Thomas used to say, "Security is not what you show people, Catherine. It is what you build when no one is looking." It was his belief in patience that guided our first investment. In the mid-90s, a small technology company was struggling to raise capital. Thomas had studied their design for a new circuit, and he was convinced it could change how energy flowed through handheld devices. I trusted his instincts more than anything, so we put in what little savings we had. It was terrifying, but Thomas said, "Faith is only real when you tie it to action." For years, nothing happened. We carried on with life, raising Clara, paying bills, managing setbacks. Then, nearly overnight, the company's design became essential to the first wave of mobile phones. Our modest stake multiplied tenfold. For the first time, we had more than enough. I remember sitting across from Thomas at the kitchen table, both of us staring at the bank statement in stunned silence. He reached over, held my hand, and whispered, "Now we have a seed. Let's plant it." We did not squander it. Instead, Thomas began studying markets the way he once studied engines. He read financial papers, called analysts, and explained terms to me in the quiet of our evenings. I learned too. I was not just a housewife anymore. I was his partner in every sense. Together, we moved carefully, reinvesting in companies with solid foundations, expanding into real estate when neighborhoods were still ignored, and keeping everything in our own names without fanfare. By the time Clara turned 10, we were no longer surviving. We were building. Then came the night when Thomas's heart gave out. His sudden absence was like a storm ripping the roof off our home. The insurance settlement arrived in neat checks and legal documents, but they could not replace his steady presence. I stood in front of the mirror the night after his funeral, the sapphire necklace around my throat, and promised him silently, "I will not waste what you built. I will carry this forward for both of us." So I did, alone. I studied harder than ever. I tracked companies the way some people follow weather patterns. I learned how to spot undervalued firms, how to create small shell companies for privacy, how to diversify so that a single storm would not sink me. The investments grew steadily, not in a blaze of glory, but like a river carving rock, slow, persistent, undeniable. Coleman Enterprises was one of those opportunities. Years ago, when their expansion nearly bankrupted them, I bought quietly through a holding company. On paper, it looked like a faceless investment group. In truth, it was me. I believed in the company's backbone. I believed its employees deserved more than collapse at the hands of poor management. My shares increased until I was their largest silent investor. To outsiders, I was invisible. To myself, I knew exactly what I had become, a woman capable of steering futures without ever stepping onto a stage. But I never told Clara. I let her believe we were modest, that my small apartment and my careful spending were all we had. She thought I relied on Thomas's pension and a little consulting work. She never saw the folders stacked in my closet or the accounts that bore quiet witness to years of discipline. Why did I keep it secret? Because I wanted her to grow strong. I wanted her to find work, to know the pride of earning her own way, to choose love based on character rather than on inheritance. If she had known the truth, would she have built her life differently? Would she have drawn men like Ethan even sooner, men who sniffed out wealth the way wolves scent blood? I could not risk it. That secrecy became my silent truth. I carried it through birthdays, through Clara's graduation, through lonely anniversaries without Thomas. Each time I touched the sapphire necklace, I remembered the vow I had made, to protect both the fortune and the values behind it. People saw a woman living quietly in an old apartment. They pitied me. But pity is a mask that kept me safe. And so the burden Ethan mocked at the engagement dinner was not a burden at all. It was a fortress of choices, stacked brick by brick in silence. The cruelest irony was that Clara, my own daughter, still thought she needed him for safety. She had no idea she already had safety because of me. That is the unspoken truth I have carried all these years, and it is both my strength and my sorrow. We met in Harrington Law's glass conference room on a gray Tuesday. The city pressed against the windows like a witness. James sat to my right with a yellow legal pad. Ethan faced me across the table, his jaw set, his attorney, Leonard Cho, arranging a neat stack of folders as if symmetry could win a case. A pitcher of water sweated onto a silver tray. I folded my hands in my lap and felt the cool weight of Thomas's sapphire against my skin. Leonard began. For the record, my client requests this meeting be treated as an informal interview. We reserve the right to pursue civil action related to concealed assets, tax evasion, and market manipulation. James clicked his pen. For the record, Ms. Hall is present voluntarily. We will respond in writing to any allegation. If you intend intimidation, note the court reporter. Intimidation does not transcribe well. Ethan slid a red folder into the center of the table. You have hidden hundreds of millions of dollars through a maze of shell companies. You can be sued. You can be prosecuted. I looked at the folder. I did not touch it. Is that your professional opinion? I asked. Or your personal grievance? He smirked. Both. Leonard cleared his throat. We have evidence of trades in Coleman Enterprises timed around confidential events. We suspect unreported beneficial ownership. We suspect failures to file. James lifted an eyebrow. Suspect is not prove. Show your data, dates, prices, counterparties. Then we can talk law rather than rumor. Ethan leaned forward. You think you can hide behind that grandmother act? You embarrassed me at my own celebration. You will not embarrass me in court. The pulse in my neck slowed. Fear gave way to a steadier sensation, like a bridge settling onto its pylons. I reached into my bag and placed a black binder on the table. My turn, I said. Leonard pushed his glasses up his nose. What is that? Documentation, I answered. Not rumor. I opened the binder to a tab marked Ownership and turned it toward the center. Coleman Enterprises Shareholder Registry Quarterly Reconciliation, Beneficial Filings, Custodial Confirmations. Please read the highlighted line. Leonard scanned. Then he read aloud, careful and slow. Shareholder, Hall Strategic Holdings. Beneficial owner, Catherine Hall. Percentage, 27. The room held its breath. Ethan's eyes flicked from the page to my face. Color drained from his cheeks. I continued. Attached are my Schedule 13G filings, amendments, broker attestations, a letter from Coleman's outside counsel acknowledging my standing. I am the largest shareholder of your employer. Your boss reports to a board that reports to shareholders. You have targeted one of them in a matter touching the company. James spoke without looking up. Model Rule 1.7, Concurrent Conflict of Interest. Model Rule 1.6, Misuse of Confidential Information. If Mr. Ethan has leveraged internal knowledge to harm Ms. Hall, we will file a grievance with the bar and seek sanctions. Leonard's tone hardened. This is not a courtroom. Do not threaten discipline. It is a warning, James said. A lawyer's duty is loyalty. Your client cannot serve Coleman while orchestrating a campaign against its largest owner. Ethan tried to recover. None of this changes the fact that she hides assets. She lives in a cheap apartment and pretends to be poor. I met his stare. Poverty does not equal virtue. Modesty does not equal fraud. I live the way I choose, not the way you value. Leonard flipped pages, then paused on a document stamped Received. Why were you at the engagement dinner with no security? Why did you not identify yourself when my client introduced you as a burden? Because I do not perform wealth, I said, and because character reveals itself when it thinks no one is watching. James slid a one-page timeline across the table. Here are the trades, none around material events, all pre-cleared or through blind instructions, taxes paid, gifts recorded. If you continue to assert manipulation without evidence, we will move for Rule 11 sanctions. Ethan bristled. You think a binder scares me? A binder does not, I said, but a resignation letter might. Ask yourself how your boss will respond when he learns you targeted a shareholder whose capital kept salaries paid. Ask yourself whether he values your ambition over the stability of his board. Silence gathered like rain. The court reporter's keys whispered. Leonard closed the folder. When he spoke, the bravado was gone. We will review and respond. James nodded. Do that, in writing. Ethan stood abruptly. His chair scraped the polished floor. This is not over. No, I said, rising. It is only the first time you have seen me clearly. We stepped into the hallway. The air smelled faintly of toner and cold wool. James rested a hand on the binder. You were firm without anger. Well done. I exhaled. My hands are shaking. That is fine, he said. The law does not grade hands. It records facts. As we waited for the elevator, I touched the sapphire at my throat. I remembered Thomas's sentence, the one I keep under glass on my desk. Do not let anyone else control your story. Ethan expected me to cower. He expected me to retreat into apology. Instead, I placed the record in the center of the table. I put the truth where even his arrogance had to read it. The elevator opened with a soft chime. I stepped in, James beside me, the doors sliding shut on the reflection of a woman who finally decided to stop being rewritten by other people's mouths. Outside, snow began to fall, quiet proof that storms can be survived together. When I returned home after that meeting with Ethan and his attorney, I thought the weight of silence might finally lift. I had placed the truth on the table. I had shown documents that could silence even the most arrogant accusations. But silence never lasts long in families. It shifts and reshapes itself into something heavier. That evening, Clara knocked on my door. Her face was pale, her lipstick faded, and her hands trembled slightly as she held her phone. "Mom, we need to talk," she said. I stepped aside and let her in. She paced the small living room, her heels tapping the floor with nervous rhythm. Finally, she turned, eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. "Ethan says you threatened him today. He says you are trying to destroy his career because you never liked him." The words landed with more force than any legal threat. My daughter, the child I carried through nights of fever, the girl who once believed I could fix any pain with a kiss on her forehead, now looked at me as if I were capable of vindictive schemes. I sat down slowly, pressing my fingers against the sapphire at my throat. "Clara, what do you believe?" She hesitated. "I don't know. I hear one story from him, another from you. You say you are just protecting yourself, but he says you are manipulating everything. I don't know who to trust anymore." Her voice cracked on the last word. The urge to defend myself surged through me like a wave. I wanted to explain every filing, every patient choice, every reason I stayed silent for years. I wanted to tell her about the sleepless nights spent balancing ledgers, about the sacrifices her father and I made so she could stand on her own. But I stopped, because the truth is not always heard when shouted. Sometimes it needs to be seen in silence. "Con," I said softly, slipping back into the word that always made her look younger in my eyes. "You don't have to choose today. Just observe. Watch. The truth has a way of revealing itself." Her eyes searched mine. "That's not enough, Mom. People are already talking. Ethan says if this goes public, it will ruin him. It could ruin me, too. Do you want that? Do I want that?" The question cut deep. No mother wants ruin for her child, even if the ruin belongs to someone who humiliated her. I reached across the space and touched her hand. "I don't want your pain. I don't want you dragged through scandal. But what I cannot allow is to have my life defined by lies. You will see, Clara. Give it time." She pulled her hand away and looked down. The distance between us widened with that simple gesture. For a long moment, we sat in silence, only the hum of the refrigerator filling the air. I remembered the nights when she used to curl beside me in bed after nightmares, whispering that she believed I was the strongest person alive. Now, that faith had eroded. In its place was doubt, planted by a man who promised her security. Inside, my heart twisted. Had my decision to keep our wealth hidden driven her into Ethan's arms? Had my silence built a hunger in her that made his ambition look like protection? I felt Thomas's absence keenly then, as if he should have been here to steady me, to help guide our daughter's heart. I had carried both mother and father roles alone, and maybe I had failed at both. Clara finally rose. "I just need space, Mom. Please, don't make me choose sides right now." I nodded. "I won't." At the door, she paused, her shoulders slumped, her voice softer now. "I want to believe you. I really do. But Ethan makes me feel safe, and sometimes I wonder if you just don't see the good in him. The good in him." I bit back the words that wanted to spill, the files, the debts, the arrogance masked as charm. Instead, I let the silence answer. "Observe, Clara," I repeated. "That is all I ask." She left, and the door clicked shut behind her. I stood in the quiet apartment, the sapphire necklace pressing against my skin like a stone of grief. I wanted to collapse, to cry into the night, but tears would not change her mind. Only time and Ethan himself would show her what lay beneath his polished exterior. I walked to the desk and opened Thomas's old drafting journal. The pages still smelled faintly of graphite and oil. On the first page, he had once written, "Truth is not fragile. It survives scrutiny." I traced the words with my finger and whispered into the empty room, "Please let her see it, Tom. Please let our daughter see it before she loses herself." That night, I slept little. My mind replayed Clara's wavering eyes, the doubt that lingered in her voice. The silence I had chosen to protect her now stood between us like a wall, and yet I knew breaking it too soon could wound her worse. So I held my silence once more, even as it broke me inside, because some lessons can only be learned when illusions collapse on their own. James moved quickly after Clara left. By morning, he had a secure portal and a checklist that would make an auditor proud. I scanned brokerage statements, K-1s, custodial letters, and every Schedule 13G amendment we had ever filed. He stacked everything into a single spine of facts: dates aligned with trades, trades aligned with pre-clearance notes, taxes aligned with receipts. When he finished, the story of my finances was boring in the best way, precise, consistent, unglamorous, the kind of story that stands when noise has burned itself out. "Next," James said on our call, "we verify your privacy structures. Nothing exotic. Standard holding companies, all properly registered, no straw names, no nominee games." I could hear him smiling. "Harrington will hate how tidy this is." While he assembled the defense, I began the counterwork. I asked what could be learned about Ethan without stepping outside the law. Public records, civil dockets, lien notices, property filings, and the detritus of status he left on social media. It was all there, if one knew how to read it. James referred me to a forensic accountant he trusted, a woman named Priya Patel who loved clean ledgers and verifiable math. We gave her permission to search. Within days, patterns surfaced. Ethan's life was polished on the outside and hollow on the inside. The leased German sedan, the luxury watch on a monthly subscription plan, the downtown apartment in his name, but largely paid on revolving credit. The private club fees covered by a personal loan with a punitive rate. Student debt lingered. Credit cards carried balances near their limits. A line of credit had been increased twice in 12 months. He had negotiated a higher draw from his firm, then spent it before the ink dried. Priya mapped cash flows against posts and purchases. The night he took Clara to the rooftop restaurant and promised he would protect her forever, he paid with a card that cleared only after 3 attempts. The weekend he rented a lake house for photographs. He split the cost with 2 friends, then captioned every picture as if he owned the shore. Image was not just vanity, it was strategy. A court docket revealed 2 quiet settlements, one with a landlord for damages after a party, one with a high-interest lender for a default cured at the last minute. None of it made him a criminal. All of it made him dangerous to a young woman who believed safety arrived wrapped in polished manners. I felt a steady ache I could not dismiss. If Clara married him, she would spend years apologizing for bills that arrived like weather. Why her? I asked myself. Then I answered the question I already knew, because Ethan thinks she is a key. He believes there is money behind the Hall name, not flashy, not loud, old, patient, and hidden. My modest apartment had fooled many people. It had not fooled him. As an associate inside Coleman's orbit, he could smell capital the way a diver tastes salt before seeing the sea. James forwarded an internal firm newsletter Ethan had helped draft. In a paragraph about shareholder relations, he had written a line that caught my eye. "Unknown capital often sits behind familiar doors." I do not know if he suspected me then, but I recognized the scent of a hunter who trusts instinct over evidence. In the middle of this work, an email arrived from a name I did not recognize. Marisol Reyes, line supervisor, Coleman Enterprises. The subject line read, "Thank you." I hesitated, then opened it. "Ms. Hall," it began, "you do not know me. 3 years ago, when our plant almost closed, I stood in the parking lot and cried because I did not know how to tell my son he might lose his health insurance during leukemia treatments. Then the closure stalled, management changed. We were told a new investor had stepped in. I kept my job, my son kept his doctors. Last month, he rang the bell after his final chemo. I saw your name whispered in a note about shareholders and took a chance that you were the person who stood behind that rescue. If this reaches the wrong Catherine, forgive me. If it reaches you, please know a boy is alive because someone like you chose to stay when it was easier to walk away." I read the message twice, then a third time. The room blurred. The sapphire at my throat felt heavier than any stone. Thomas would have printed the email and pinned it above his workbench. I forwarded it to James, then wrote back with 2 sentences that felt inadequate for what she had given me. "You are not wrong. I am grateful your son is well. Keep going." The next file from Priya arrived that evening, a neat report with tabs labeled liabilities, assets, and behavioral flags. At the end, she added a short assessment that avoided drama while stating the plain risk. Subject's purchasing behavior indicates sustained overextension. Reliance on image suggests intent to secure social and financial upgrade via marriage. Recommend preserving documentation and avoiding direct confrontation until leverage is necessary. Leverage. The word did not thrill me. It sobered me. I did not want a war. I wanted clarity. Yet clarity requires light, and light requires the lifting of veils. Ethan had tried to wrap me in accusation to make me small. The facts unwrapped him instead. James called again. "We will bundle our records into a master index," he said. "If Harrington pushes, they will meet paper, not panic. Also, Catherine, keep that email from the employee. It is not legal evidence, it is ballast for your spirit." I smiled at the phrasing. Ballast. Yes. Numbers held one kind of weight, gratitude held another. I placed Marisol's email beside the binder on my desk, 2 anchors keeping me steady. One spoke of rows that reconciled, the other spoke of lives that continued because someone quietly stayed when it mattered. Between them, I felt the outline of my purpose, not revenge, not spectacle, protection. Protect my daughter from a man who loved mirrors more than truth. Protect the people working under roofs my capital helped keep standing. Protect the story I had written in patient ink. I closed the laptop and watched the street turn silver under a curtain of snow. When I finally rose, I whispered into the quiet, "Observe, Clara. Please observe." I could not force her to see, but I could prepare the ground so that when the illusion cracked, she would have something solid beneath her feet. The notice arrived on CI, cream-colored paper with the seal of the state bar printed at the top. Ethan had filed a formal complaint accusing me of concealing assets, engaging in market manipulation, and undermining his professional reputation. The words were designed to wound, but more than that, they were designed to intimidate. My silence at the dinner had not satisfied him, nor had the binder of evidence I placed in front of him in that conference room. He wanted spectacle. He wanted me dragged into a hall of law where whispers turned into records. The preliminary hearing was scheduled in a downtown building with marble steps and an echoing atrium. I arrived early with James at my side, carrying the same binder we had prepared weeks ago. My palms felt clammy, but my face remained composed. The sapphire necklace rested cool against my throat, an anchor against the rising tide of fear. Inside, the panel of 3 disciplinary officers sat at a raised bench, papers neatly stacked in front of them, rows of wooden chairs stretched behind me, filled with lawyers, clerks, and curious observers. Ethan sat across the aisle, immaculate in his dark suit, a look of righteous determination fixed on his face. His attorney Leonard leaned toward him, whispering strategy, occasionally glancing at me with thinly veiled disdain. The lead officer opened the session. "We are here to review the complaint filed by attorney Ethan Ward against Catherine Hall. Mr. Ward, you may proceed." Ethan rose smoothly. He had rehearsed every word. "Members of the panel, I come before you not lightly but out of duty. I have discovered evidence suggesting that Ms. Hall, while presenting herself as an ordinary retiree, has in fact concealed substantial assets through shell companies and has manipulated shares in Coleman Enterprises, a company with which I am professionally connected. Such conduct, if left unchecked, undermines the integrity of our profession and the markets we rely on." His voice carried confidence, and murmurs spread across the room. He sat down, satisfied, and glanced at Clara, who sat near the back. Her face was unreadable. My heart clenched. James stood calmly. "We will respond in due course. But first, we request the opportunity for testimony from a material witness." The panel exchanged glances. "Granted," the lead officer said. The doors at the back of the hall opened, and Richard Coleman entered. His presence was magnetic. The murmurs hushed instantly. He walked with the authority of a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms. But when he reached the front, he bowed his head briefly in my direction before facing the panel. "My name is Richard Coleman," he said. "I am the president of Coleman Enterprises. I am here to speak not as a friend, but as a businessman who owes a debt of truth. 3 years ago, when my company faced collapse from overextension, a silent investor stepped in. That investor was Catherine Hall. Through her capital and her patience, Coleman Enterprises was not only saved from bankruptcy, but stabilized and allowed to grow. Hundreds of employees kept their jobs, communities kept their anchors, and my own family avoided disaster. Without her, there would be no company for Attorney Ward to serve. To accuse her of manipulation is not only inaccurate, it is an insult to the very foundation of our survival." Gasps rippled through the hall. People leaned forward, whispering to one another. The panelists' eyes widened. Even the court reporter glanced up from her keys. Ethan's face turned ashen. He gripped his pen so tightly it snapped in half. Leonard shuffled papers furiously, but no document could undo what Richard had just declared in public record. Richard continued, his voice steady. "Every transaction Ms. Hall conducted with us was above board, reported and cleared. I can provide letters from our auditors, our counsel, and our board. If you require them, I have copies here." He placed a folder on the table with deliberate calm. To call her a manipulator is false. To call her a benefactor is the truth. The silence that followed was profound. Clara, in the back row, brought a hand to her mouth as though she were seeing me for the very first time. James stood, his tone precise. "We submit that this complaint is not about law, but about resentment. It is the attempt of one man to weaponize procedure against a woman who chose discretion. The facts speak for themselves. The company at issue confirms her legitimacy. The records confirm her compliance. The only manipulation here is the attempt to twist reputation into leverage." The panel conferred quietly. Finally, the lead officer spoke. "We see no evidence at this time of misconduct warranting further investigation. The complaint is noted and dismissed. Mr. Ward, be advised that frivolous complaints may themselves invite review." The gavel struck once. The session ended. For a long moment, no one moved. Then voices erupted. Whispers, questions, the shuffling of papers. Richard turned toward me, gave a single respectful nod, and left the hall. Ethan stood rigid, his jaw clenched, while Leonard whispered furiously in his ear. Clara looked at him, then at me, her expression torn between confusion and dawning recognition. I rose quietly, gathered my binder, and walked toward the door. Every step felt heavy with memory. Thomas's voice, the years of silence, the vow to protect Clara. Outside, the winter air cut sharp against my cheeks, but it also tasted clean. James joined me on the steps. "You did not have to say a word. The truth spoke for you." I touched the sapphire at my throat. Thomas always said silence can be power. Today, it was. Behind us, the hall still buzzed with disbelief. Inside, Ethan's carefully polished image had cracked in front of his peers. And for the first time, Clara had seen that her mother was not a burden to be mocked, but the woman whose quiet choices had saved an empire. The news came less than a week after the hearing. James called me early in the morning, his voice calm but edged with satisfaction. "Ethan's firm has terminated him, effective immediately. They cited conflict of interest and conduct unbecoming." I sat at the kitchen table, tea steaming in front of me, and let the words sink in. Ethan Ward, the man who mocked me at my daughter's engagement dinner, who weaponized law to paint me as a fraud, was now unemployed. Worse for him, James explained, the state bar had opened an inquiry into whether his frivolous complaint and misuse of insider knowledge constituted an ethical violation. Disbarment was no longer a far-off threat. It was a shadow creeping closer each day. That afternoon, I walked past the law firm on my way to meet James. Through the glass doors, I saw two receptionists whispering while a man carried a banker's box down the hallway. It was Ethan. His perfect suit looked wrinkled, his hair disheveled. He kept his head down, but I could see the fury in the way his jaw worked as he clutched the box. Files, framed certificates, and a few desk trinkets peeked out. The image of control he had always curated was gone. He looked small, like a boy caught cheating on an exam. Word spread quickly. In legal circles, reputation can collapse faster than finances. Ethan had spent years constructing the persona of the polished young associate destined for partnership. But clients do not like scandal, and partners do not like liability. The man who once mocked me as a burden had become one himself, to his firm, to his family, and to the image he tried so hard to project. Clara saw it too. She called me late one night, her voice trembling. "Mom, it's true, he lost his job. They're saying he might lose his license. He didn't even come home tonight." I closed my eyes, pain and relief warring in my chest. "Where is he?" "I don't know. He said he was meeting someone about money." "Mom, I don't understand. He always told me he was secure, that he had everything under control. But now I'm finding letters from creditors, past due notices. There are accounts I never even knew existed." Her voice cracked. "I thought he was protecting me. I thought he was strong." I wanted to gather her into my arms like when she was a child, but all I could do was let her words spill through the phone. She was beginning to see what I had seen all along. The next morning, she came to my apartment. She looked tired, her eyes swollen from crying. She carried a folder of papers, bills, debt statements, copies of lease agreements. She dropped them on the table as if they burned her hands. "He owes more than $200,000, she whispered. "Credit cards, loans, even money borrowed from friends. He's been living a lie, Mom. The car, the apartment, the trips. None of it was real. He built everything on debt. And he married me to climb out of it. He thought you had money, that I was his. Way to reach it." I touched the sapphire necklace, grounding myself before I answered. "Now you see him clearly." Tears slid down her cheeks. I defended him. "I told you not to take his words seriously. I believed him over you." She covered her face with her hands. "How could I have been so blind?" I reached across the table and gently pulled her hands down. "Love makes us want to believe the best. That is not blindness, Clara. That is hope. But sometimes, hope attaches itself to the wrong person. What matters is that you see it now." She shook her head. "He made me feel safe. but it was all an illusion. Yes, I said softly, and safety built on illusion always collapses. Later that week, reports surfaced in the business press. Coleman Enterprises issued a statement affirming their shareholder structure and thanking silent partners for their role in stabilizing the company. Ethan's name appeared in whispers instead, an associate dismissed for ethical lapses, a lawyer under review for professional misconduct. The contrast could not have been sharper. For Ethan, the consequences came fast. Creditors began filing suits. His parents' house, already mortgaged to the hilt, was at risk of foreclosure. The glossy facade of the successful young attorney crumbled into tabloid fodder. From rising star to ruin, one headline read. Clara watched it unfold with heartbreak written across her face. She had loved the man he pretended to be. Now she was forced to face the man he truly was. One evening, she sat on my couch, staring at nothing. He said I was his future, but I was only his exit plan. I brushed her hair back from her forehead the way I used to when she was a little girl. You are more than someone else's plan. You are your own future. Her shoulders shook as she leaned against me. I don't know how to start over. You already have, I told her. The moment you chose to see the truth, you began again. In the quiet that followed, I thought of Thomas, of the promises he whispered into her crib all those years ago. He wanted her to be safe, yes, but he also wanted her to be strong. Perhaps strength can only be born after safety shatters. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had changed, but in our small apartment, the world had shifted. Ethan's fall was not just his undoing. It was Clara's awakening. She had seen the mask slip, and though her heart was broken, broken hearts can heal stronger than before. As for me, I held her close, my silence once again my shield. Not silence born of fear, but silence chosen with intention. The silence of a woman who knew that the burden Ethan mocked was the very strength that had saved them both. Clara arrived at my apartment late in the evening, long after the sun had set. I opened the door to find her standing in the hallway, her shoulders slumped, her eyes red and swollen from hours of crying. For a moment she just stared at me, as if searching for the right to step inside. Then the dam broke. She rushed forward and collapsed into my arms, sobbing against my shoulder. "Mom," she gasped between tears. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for not listening, for defending him, for letting them laugh at you. I let Ethan and his family treat you like you were nothing, and I stood there and did nothing. I betrayed you." Her words cut deep, not because they hurt me, but because they revealed how much she had been hurting herself. I guided her inside, closed the door gently, and led her to the couch. She gripped my hands like a child terrified of being abandoned, and in that moment, she was not the grown woman with a diamond ring on her finger. She was the same little girl who once hid behind me on her first day of school, clinging to my skirt because she needed me to face the world for her. "Clara," I said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her damp face. "You don't need to apologize. You loved him, and love can make us blind. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." She shook her head fiercely. "No, Mom, I should have seen it. You stood there at that dinner, humiliated, and I told you not to make me look bad. I let his words matter more than your dignity. I let people laugh at you, and I never defended you. What kind of daughter does that?" Her body trembled with guilt, and I felt her shame pouring into me like rain. I tightened my arms around her, holding her close until her sobs slowed into shudders. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. "I don't need to be defended, Clara. I never did. I survived worse than cruel jokes. I survived loneliness, grief, and years of silence. I don't need applause or protection. All I wanted was for you to understand one truth." She lifted her tear-stained eyes to mine, waiting. "Value," I said slowly, "is not in their cheap laughter, nor in their false applause. Value is not in cars or suits or perfect photographs. True value is quiet. It is in character. It is in sacrifice. It is in the choices we make when no one else is looking. Her tears welled again, but this time they were softer, gentler. I see it now, Mom. I see you. All these years I thought you were just ordinary. I thought Ethan was the one who could give me safety. But it was you all along. You were the one holding everything together. I smiled through my own tears. I didn't want you to depend on money, Clara. I wanted you to build your own life, to believe in your own strength. That's why I kept my silence. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I trusted you to become your own woman. She buried her face against my chest, her words muffled. I don't deserve you. You're wrong, I whispered. You deserve every ounce of love your father and I ever gave you. You stumbled, yes, but stumbling is how we learn to walk without falling. What matters is not the mistake. What matters is what you do after it. We sat like that for a long time, her tears soaking into my blouse, my arms refusing to let her go. The distance that had stretched between us over these months, the silence, the doubt, the mistrust, began to dissolve in that embrace. She was my daughter, my only child, and no mistake could sever that bond. Finally, she pulled back slightly, her face still streaked with tears, but her eyes clearer. I don't know how to fix everything, Mom, but I want to try. I want to learn from you. I want to live by the values you carried, not the illusions I chased. I kissed her forehead, just as I had done countless times when she was small. Then we begin again, together. The sapphire necklace pressed coolly against my skin, a reminder of Thomas's promise that love outlasts time. I imagined him standing there, smiling at us, proud that the family he once anchored had found its way back to each other. For the first time in months, I felt the heaviness in my chest lift. My daughter had come home, not just to my apartment, but to the truth. And in that moment, with her arms tight around me and tears drying on both our faces, I realized that healing does not arrive in thunder or applause. Healing arrives in silence, in forgiveness, in the quiet strength of love that refuses to let go. That night, as Clara drifted to sleep on my couch, her head resting in my lap like she had when she was a child, I stroked her hair and whispered, "We are not broken, Clara. We are stronger than ever." And for the first time since Thomas's death, I truly believed it. The invitation came on heavy cream paper, embossed with the Coleman Enterprises seal. Richard Coleman himself had signed it, his pen strokes strong and deliberate. He asked me to join the company's board of directors, citing my majority stake and the steady guidance of my capital during their darkest hours. It was a role many would have seized immediately, a public seat, influence, recognition. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine it. My name etched on plaques, my voice echoing in boardrooms, my decisions shaping industries. But when I held the letter in my hands, the sapphire necklace cool against my collarbone, I felt Thomas's presence reminding me of what mattered most. I called Richard and thanked him. He insisted, "Catherine, the company owes its survival to you. You deserve a seat at the table." I smiled gently, though he could not see it through the phone. "Richard, I never rescued Coleman for power. I did it because I believed in the people behind those walls, the engineers, the factory workers, the families depending on paychecks. My late husband, Thomas, taught me that the truest measure of strength is how many lives you lift quietly. That's all I ever wanted." There was silence on the line, and then Richard said softly, "Then what would honor you?" The answer had been growing inside me for years, waiting for the right time. "A scholarship fund," I said, For young students who dream of engineering but cannot afford the path. I want it named after Thomas Hall, the man whose vision started everything. Let Coleman administer it if they choose. But I don't want my face on magazine covers or my name at gala dinners. I want to see children given a chance to do what Thomas never finished. Richard exhaled slowly. That would be extraordinary. We will make it happen. So the Thomas Hall Scholarship Fund was born. I transferred a portion of my dividends into a dedicated trust, large enough to secure generations of opportunity. The paperwork was dry, full of legal clauses and tax structures, but beneath those words lived something alive, a promise that a boy or girl in a small town, holding nothing but curiosity, could step into a laboratory or classroom without fear of bills crushing their future. When the fund was announced, journalists tried to draw me out, hoping for sound bites and photographs. I declined every request. The story was not mine. It belonged to the children whose lives would be rewritten. It belonged to Thomas, who once sketched designs by candlelight because electricity bills were too high. It belonged to every family who had once prayed for a door to open. Clara stood beside me when we signed the founding documents. She held my hand and whispered, "Dad would be proud." Tears burned my eyes, but I kept my composure. "He is proud, Clara. He always believed our lives meant more when we gave them away." In that moment, I felt no hunger for revenge, no satisfaction in Ethan's downfall. That chapter had closed itself. What mattered now was how I used the power I had once hidden. Power, I realized, was never meant to sit in vaults or silence opponents. Power, at its highest form, was meant to heal. The first recipients of the scholarship wrote me letters, handwritten notes, shaky with excitement. One girl said she wanted to design sustainable batteries. One boy dreamed of robotic prosthetics after losing a cousin in an accident. They thanked me as if I had done something heroic, but I knew the truth. I had simply returned what Thomas gave me, the belief that ordinary people could create extraordinary change if given a chance. I kept those letters in the same box as our old investment records. Numbers built the foundation, but words carried the meaning. Each time I opened it, I reminded myself why silence had mattered and why breaking it now mattered more. Coleman prospered. The board respected me even without my physical presence. Richard occasionally called, updating me on progress, thanking me again. Each time I repeated the same phrase, "Use the profit to build, not just to grow." He laughed once and said, "You sound more like a founder than a shareholder." Perhaps that was true. But I needed no title to live with purpose. In the quiet of my apartment, I touched the sapphire necklace and felt a calm I had not known in years. The humiliation at the orgy dinner, the accusations, the hearing, they were storms that had passed. What remained was clarity. I had not fought for dominance. I had fought for truth, for my daughter's awakening, for the legacy of a man who believed in light when the world was dim. The healing did not come in thunder. It came in the soft click of a pen signing a scholarship trust. It came in Clara's tearful smile when she finally understood her mother's worth. It came in the quiet knowledge that dozens of young dreamers would walk into classrooms because someone they would never meet had chosen generosity over vengeance. Power could have made me feared. Instead, it made me free. And freedom, I realized, is best spent giving others the chance to stand. That was the closure I needed. Not revenge, not recognition. Healing. Clara ended the engagement quietly, without spectacle or bitterness. She returned the ring to Ethan in a small box, her voice steady as she told him it was over. There were no tears that day, only the clarity of someone who had finally seen the mask for what it was. She told me later, "I thought he was my safety, but safety built on lies is just another kind of prison." Those words told me my daughter had grown stronger, even through heartbreak. She moved into a smaller apartment of her own and began working on a project she had long hidden in the shadow of Ethan's ambition. Clara had always loved design, the way small details shaped how people felt in a room. She enrolled in classes at a local institute, funding herself through long hours and quiet determination. I watched her find her footing, not as someone's fiancée or someone's daughter, but as a woman with her own vision. There was pain, yes, but there was also resilience. She was walking a path Thomas would have admired. One evening, weeks later, the apartment smelled faintly of chamomile and lemon polish. I set 2 cups on the table, one for myself and one before the framed photograph of Thomas that always watched over us. The candlelight flickered against his face, younger than I remembered him now. I poured the tea slowly, the steam curling upward like a prayer. "Thomas," I whispered, "do you see? She is standing on her own now. We protected her, not by shielding her from pain, but by letting truth arrive in its own time. It broke her heart, yes, but it also set her free." The sapphire necklace rested against my skin, cool and steady. I touched it with my fingertips and smiled faintly. "You once told me that silence can be a form of strength." You were right. Sometimes silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is the loudest voice of all. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hiss of the kettle cooling. Yet in that quiet, I felt a sense of closure I had not known before. The laughter that once humiliated me had faded into memory. Ethan's accusations had dissolved into the ruin of his own making. Clara's tears had turned into resolve, and I had chosen to use power not for revenge, but for healing. Silence can sometimes be the loudest voice of all. I whispered again, the words carrying weight in both languages of my heart. Silence had not destroyed me. It had preserved me until the right moment came. I lifted my cup, sipped the tea, and let peace settle inside me. Before we say goodbye, I want to turn to you, the ones who have sat with me through this journey. Do you think I was too cold? Too restrained? Or do you understand why I chose silence over shouting, patience over spectacle? Have you ever lived through something similar, where truth revealed itself only after pain? If you have, I invite you to share your story in the comments. And one more thing, we would love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read every word with gratitude. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle does not knock on your door. It waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart. Take care, and we will meet again in the next story.